All right, folks, welcome to Free Speech versus Censorship on the Spiral for Spiral Dynamics Integral Live. I will be your host for this, Josh Schlossberg. I'm an author and a journalist in exile. And let's start from the beginning here. Okay, so my background, why am I doing this? Why am I the person to do this? So, all my life, people have been trying to shut me up, including trying to share this event. Teachers at school always had a problem with me talking back. Police used to arrest me for organizing, taking part in protests. Employers would want to censor me for having side creative projects that they didn't find to be professional. Fellow environmentalists, I was a longtime environmentalist, I would point out the failures of the environmental movement, how we could do better. They'd want to silence me on that. Editors, my editors, when I would write journalistic pieces, if anything challenged their personal ideology, they didn't want to run it. And publishers around a lot of my fiction. So I've had a bunch of stuff out there, but a lot of stuff I noticed if it pushed anyone's ideological buttons too obviously, they would not let it through. So that's why I'm doing this. I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. That's for sure. I am not unbiased. None of us are, but I like to try to see this through lots of different lenses, and Spiral Dynamics helps me to do that. So let's talk about what censorship is, because the funny thing is a lot of people get triggered even by that word, and most people what they think is censorship is something that is bad, that if it's done to me, as in if it's something that I like, it's censorship. If I'm doing it, it's not. That's not censorship. So let's look at the definition of words. So censor, according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, to examine in order to suppress or delete anything considered objectionable. So if there can be perceived to be an objection to it, that's objectionable, it goes. So that can mean really anything. It can be positive or negative. And it is just funny how when people are like, oh, that's not censorship. And then I say, well, what word would you rather use? And they just come up with like a long definition, a long convoluted explanation. It's like, well, so how about we just stick with the word censorship and just agree on the definition and realize sometimes there can be positive censorship versus negative censorship. And that varies for the individual. It varies probably based on your spiral dynamics V meme. For instance, a group that, say, is a Facebook group and it's dog lovers, and somebody comes on and says, cats, 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 you can delete them and you can censor them. It's probably the appropriate thing to do. This is a group for dog lovers and you're posting about cats. Censored. But you probably should. You're in the wrong group. It's still censorship. It's examining to suppress, delete it. It's objectionable to the group that wants to talk about dogs. So I think that's just important to frame it that way at first, because people tend to have an issue with that. So with that being finished, there are two different kinds of censorship. Oops. So there's censorship on the ground, sort of in person, real life. Typically, that ends up being government, police, whatever. And then there is online censorship, right? And because so much of the public square has moved into the online space, that's a lot of where that's really happening. So I'm going to give a couple examples here. So I got to pull out of this to show the video. So bear with me. So this is going to be a background from my own life to make this more concrete, but also to show you why I care about this. Just to set it up, in 2008 in Eugene, Oregon, I was handing out brochures on a public sidewalk on environmental issues after consulting with an attorney to make sure it was legal. There was a police officer who shut down other protests. I had actually complained about him. He told me I had to leave. I couldn't do what I was doing anymore, my practicing my free speech. I knew he was wrong, but I was there with an intern. I didn't want to freak her out. So I started packing everything up. Then he came out of the bank again to harass me. And I took out my video camera. I said, I'm going to be recording you. I wanted to make sure he knew in advance. And I started recording him. And then this is what happened. It's just 2 minutes, so very short, but all right. Hopefully, folks can see this.
I'm telling you, if you're going to protest, we have to be moving. Or if you're going to picket and you're on a sidewalk, you can't block pedestrian traffic. Right. And you need to keep moving. So you can't have a stationary position like this. Okay. I run in the same we have the code here, and my understanding is that we can ask people if they want a brochure. If they don't want it, we let it go, and that's what we do. Yeah. Okay, well, that's all we've done and all we will do. And I can assure you of that. Well, that's not the case from the other week when you guys were out here protesting it. I am not other people. I am me. My suggestion is you find some other place to do this, because now this is where we're watching because of what happened last week. It's okay if you watch us because we're totally legit. Got to keep moving. Don't have a stationary position. Okay. This property from here to here belongs to the bank. Absolutely. This is sidewalk. Understand? This is sidewalk. You have to walk the sidewalk. Not got to keep sidewalk. All right. Okay. I'm not sure if that's true. We're gonna go. We'll move for today. Do you just want to argue? No. I looked up on this ahead of time. That's why. And I appreciate that. Okay. I will get back to this issue. I'll find out more about it. Tell your attorney, whoever it is, that you're setting up in the middle of a right-of-way for pedestrians. I'm not in the middle of it from what I see. I'm at the edge. And if I'm any further, I'm in the street. So where can I go? You can't have a stationary position on a sidewalk without a permit. You don't have a permit to do this. You can't do this. So I can get a permit? You need to be moving. I don't know. You have to talk to the permit department or your attorney. I don't believe what you're saying is accurate. Are you taping me right now? Yes, and I did say that to you twice. No, you asked me if you could. You didn't inform your word. Give me that as evidence. Give it. Ma'am, you saw that, right? You saw what? I didn't see it. I discussed the issue.
Okay, did everyone see that okay? Just let me know in the chat. Oh, the volume was low. I screwed that up. Oh, well, that's fine. So that was me. Uh-oh. Hold on a second. Why is it still playing? Sorry about that. Okay, so back to me. Can folks see and hear me okay right now? Just let me know in the chat just to make sure. I'll just edit this out. Okay, well, you could hear. So basically, that was just a cop lying to me and taking away my free speech rights. And he basically, at that point, he demanded my video camera. I didn't give it to him. He grabbed me. He threw me to the ground. He jammed his knee in my neck. He injured me. He took me to jail, stole my camera. I sued them and I won. So that was that. But that's an example of taking away free speech. That's censorship on the ground, the old school, old fashioned way. Now, I want to do a very brief experiment before I go back into the slideshow. So I will ask folks to pull up, if you have Facebook, pull up your Facebook Messenger and start crafting a message to me, Josh Schlossberg. And I'm going to do a little experiment for folks. Okay, I'm going to post a link in the chat. I would like you to take this link and put it into the Facebook Messenger message to me and press send. So this is censored.tv. It is a conservative libertarian pundit comedy website. Most of these folks have been kicked off of social media. I don't share their politics, just to be clear. I disagree with most of what they're saying. It's pretty much what you'd expect. It's a lot of group centric opinion. It's some truth, a lot of lies, some exaggeration, plenty of mean things, a lot of offensive jokes, right? So that's, they've been wiped from social media. So they can't post on social media or anything like that. So this is just their link to their website. And for those who are sending that through Facebook Messenger, tell me what ends up happening. If you can just put that in the chat there. Bet said, couldn't send. What do you mean, Bet?
Do you want me to come off? It's there's a little red exclamation mark. When I click on it, it says couldn't send.
Yes. And now
very weird.
Thank you. Thank you, Bet. So yes, Facebook will not let you send that link to even your friends. So Facebook says this conservative, stupid website is so terrible that you can't post it on Facebook. Fine. You can't send it privately to your friends. So I just wanted you to have that fresh in your mind as we continue with some of the discussion. So I have to find my slideshow again for some reason. I don't know why sorry about that. A lot of editing to do here. Okay. Yep. So another person said they got an error when they sent it. Right. It doesn't, Facebook won't let you send that link and certain other links. They literally won't even let you send it. So that's fun. All right, let's move right along. So that's the tech censorship stuff there, and that is one of our overlords. So let's move into spiral dynamics. Now, pretty much everyone in this group knows what spiral dynamics is, but some folks who might be listening to the video or watching the video are not as familiar. I'm going to do a super brief overview. So just like children go through stages of development, adults do as well. Spiral dynamics is a model of adult psychological development. Basically, it's the lens through which you view the world, largely based on your values. So the first six stages are called tier one. And that's when you tend to believe only your lens is the correct lens, versus the next few stages are called tier two. And you can sort of see through all the lenses at once. This is a real bastardized version of spiral dynamics. And the stages tend to alternate between individualistic and communal. So that's the gist of spiral dynamics. You want to know more about it, you can read this book that's up there. You can go online. It's all over the place for those who don't know what spiral dynamics is. So I'm going to now move into the stages of spiral dynamics and talk about some of the healthy and unhealthy expressions of free speech and censorship based on my opinion. So I'm going to skip the first two stages of beige, which is basically the survival stage, and purple, which is the tribal stage. I'm just going to skip those, and we're going to start right into red. Now, red is the egocentric stage. It's kind of all about me. I'll do whatever it takes to get my way. That's the concept of red. So let's get into some healthy free speech versions. So these are just examples. There can be countless versions. You don't even have to agree with me on anything like that. So one version of what could be red healthy free speech. Keep in mind, I'm not endorsing or disapproving of any of these statements here. This is just based on these values, based on this lens through which one views the world. This might be considered their healthy version of free speech. So I'm going to tell someone what I think of them, even if they don't want to hear it. It's basically just being mean, right? So that's a healthy version of red free speech. Maybe at some of the other stages it's not so healthy, but that's a justified version of what healthy free speech can be at the red stage. Now, an unhealthy version of free speech at the red stage would be I'm going to threaten someone with violence. So, speech that is promising physical harm. That's actually illegal, and that fits into the red realm of I want to say whatever I want. It's probably an unhealthy version of it, in my opinion, depending on what's going on, right? So, moving forward with red, some red healthy censorship, because until we come up with a better word, censorship's what I'm going with. So, this would be a healthy version of red censorship. You've been saying things about me that I don't like. I'm going to file a lawsuit to shut you up. So maybe this is going a little bit over the top by pushing those legal boundaries. Maybe it's a frivolous lawsuit. You're not physically harming anyone. So if you're going to be censoring people in red, it's going to be a bit egocentric. This is at least a healthier version of doing it. Now, an unhealthy version of red censorship, in my opinion, is I will beat the hell out of you if you spread rumors about me. So there's no legal justification here. And again, it's that threat of violence. So you're trying to shut somebody up by threatening physical force against them. I would say that's a red version of unhealthy censorship. So moving into blue. So blue stage is absolutistic. It tends to be a lot of black and white thinking. This is right. This is wrong. End of discussion. What's a healthy free speech version of blue? Well, again, keep in mind, I'm not advocating for or even opposing any of these things here. So I will advocate for what I believe is good and speak out against evil in a completely legal way. So, like this protest for religious freedom. I don't know what this group is here, but let's just assume they're not doing anything terrible. They just want the right to say their stuff. That seems to be healthy blue free speech, right? I might not agree with their opinions, but seems like they're not harming anyone. Now, an unhealthy version of blue free speech would be I will harass people who I think are doing evil deeds. So these are these awful people in Westboro Baptist Church. So they'll go and they'll protest funerals. They are, I'll just say, they're scumbags. And this is what I would say. It's still free speech. Maybe they should be able to say their terrible things, but it's an unhealthy version of blue free speech. And I don't even need to read their signs, obviously. So blue censorship that might be healthy could be, we'll ask people not to pay attention to content we find objectionable. So maybe there's a book that comes out and that's scandalous. They write an op ed to a newspaper. Dear sirs, please do not read this book. It is not something that should be in our society. Okay, I don't agree with that. I think people should be able to put stuff out there. But if they want to say, I think this is bad, and they just want to write a letter about it, that to me seems to be a healthy form of blue censorship. Meanwhile, an unhealthy form of blue censorship would be, we'll call for the ban of content we find objectionable so no one can access it. Basically, trying to get publishers to drop a book deal. I dislike this book so much, I'm not going to read it. Okay. I don't want anyone else to read it by convincing them to not read it. Okay. You know what? I don't even want it in print, and we're going to threaten you publishers until you drop it. They used to be what the right did. Now it's what the left does. So everyone's guilty. Blue can be across political lines. Any of these stages really can. And that's something that we tend to see a lot these days. And I believe it's coming from an unhealthy blue censorship, in my opinion, most of the time. Orange, next stage. So this is materialist achiever, striving for status, very individualistic. I'm going to make it to the top, but I'll follow basic rules. So they pass through that blue stage of basic right and wrong morality kind of stuff. So they're not the same as orange is not the same as red, where it's like, I'm going to do anything I can get away with no matter who it hurts. Orange has a bit of, okay, I'm going to participate in society. I'm going to follow rules. I might push them a bit though. And that's the concept of orange. So what would be a healthy version of free speech at orange? Well, a healthy version of orange free speech would be, I'm going to share my perspective on an issue, even if some people happen to find it offensive. Sorry, but you don't like to hear this. Well, I'm still going to talk about it. I'm not harming anyone by saying these things. So it's pretty much any opinion on a controversial issue. Somebody's not going to like it. So I would say that's orange free speech. That's healthy. Now, unhealthy orange free speech would be, I'm going to publicly smear someone's reputation so I can improve my own standing, my own status, right? Because orange is very concerned with that. They're not necessarily breaking laws or not threatening to hurt anybody, but they're putting out a lot of crap and say negative political ads by candidate. There, it's like, hey, interesting candidate. You're not talking about how you're going to do something better. You're just talking about what this other person does. You take something out of context and you smear them. I would say that would be an unhealthy free speech for orange. Super common. Now, what is healthy censorship for orange? Well, at my company, I'm not going to allow people to make money off controversial topics, no matter their position, right? So this could be YouTube that won't allow people to monetize videos that are on a certain topic. So no matter what your perspective is on a given topic, they have certain topics you're not really allowed to make money off of. I don't care if you're far right, far left, in the middle, you don't get to monetize it. You can still put out the video, but you can't make money off it. So that's their way of sort of trying to not encourage the fury over certain ideas. And I'm not saying I support that or not, but at least it's sort of a balanced thing. So it's orange censorship. It's healthy censorship in my mind, even if I don't necessarily agree with it. So unhealthy orange censorship would be, I'm going to censor certain perspectives on controversial topics while allowing or even promoting other perspectives on that same topic. So that's basically almost all social media, really, Facebook, including a lot of YouTube. So basically here it's like, we're not even going to let this perspective on, and based on what? Usually based on the V-meme that the company is coming from or the customer base that they're catering to. So I would say that's most of, let's just say that's a lot of the censorship that's going on, I would say, in orange is that unhealthy. They prop some things up and it's pretty arbitrary and it's changing all the time. And so social media has gotten themselves into a very difficult position by deciding to be the censors, because their decisions are almost arbitrary. green. Next stage, green. So this is going back to the communal. So this is sensitive, social, bleeding heart, concern for the vulnerable. We're all in this together, unless you disagree with us. In that case, you are excluded. So that's kind of green. And a healthy version of green free speech may be we have the right to speak out against the establishment, whatever that may be. So the 1960s Berkeley free speech movement. So these days, for whatever reason, free speech tends to be associated with the right, mostly because they're tending to be censored a little more. But in the 60s, this was all free speech stuff was all leftist stuff. So it was fighting against Vietnam War, it was civil rights issues, it was women's movement, all that stuff. We have the right to say this stuff. I would say that is a shining example of green free speech. Now, healthy free speech. Now, green unhealthy free speech, I would say, is we will publicly call out mainstream moderates. So folks who are just like, all right, I don't agree with them, but that's just, the typical conservative perspective on stuff. We're going to call them all extremists. So basically, when folks on the left, I would say, call everyone who isn't on the left a Nazi, I would say that's a green free speech that is unhealthy. I would say that also comes from the right, but I don't think that that's actually coming from green when it's coming from the right. So obviously the right is calling anyone who's on the left a communist, but they're usually coming from blue orange, in my opinion. So that's fun. Sorry, Shrek. The next, healthy censorship in green. We call on authorities to silence any incitement of violence against those we believe to be the most vulnerable. So that's when people are threatening to physically attack people on social media. Green is like, authorities step in, whether it's police, whether it's legislation, whether it's a tech company. We need you to censor them because they are threatening violence. That seems to be a healthy version of green censorship. Personally, I support that. Now, unhealthy censorship in green. We call on authorities to silence anything that is counter to or critiques our views by claiming it does harm, right? So they're advocating for a legal policy position. That is violence. No, it's not. It's not violence. So I would say that's a very unhealthy version of green censorship. And it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. You keep saying everything is like that, then people are going to stop paying attention to you when it actually matters, like for the actual incitements to violence. So I would say that's a way to distinguish that. Now, very quickly, these are some rhetorical questions. Nobody needs to answer these right now, but just some things to think about in terms of that tier one, these lenses that we've gone through in terms of free speech versus censorship. So some just questions to ponder, and then I'll get into yellow and then we'll finish this up. So how can we tell when censorship is legitimate or not, right? Because so much of it I think is not, but some of it certainly is. So how can we even tell? And I think it's based a lot on the V memes that you're in, right? So, but a further question, when it is legitimate censorship, you know what, that should be censored. Does censorship actually work? So does the attempt to censor often get that very thing or person more attention? Does it backfire? Is there a backlash from that? And if it does work sometimes, let's say it quiets these people down, does it make martyrs or free speech heroes who become famous who would have otherwise been invisible? That's happened time and time again. People you never would have heard of, they were censored and silenced or fined for speaking, and then they become celebrities. Like, oops, that didn't work. Does free speech lead to violence, as many people claim? Often speech is violence, people will say. Or is that maybe that's true sometimes, right? But what about this? Does not being able to speak lead to violence? So people are like, oh, I want to spout my opinion, and they get it out of their system. I'm not even allowed to spout my opinion. Oh, they're after me. That's it. I got to take this to the next level. If I can't speak, then I'm going to act. And oops, that's not a great thing. So is the best way to combat bad speech, bad free speech, to try to shut it down? Is censorship always the best response? Or is the best way to combat bad speech by offering better speech, taking those ideas apart so the whole world can see how wrong they are? if you just shine the light on a lot of the idiocy, that's the best way to do it. But that takes work, that takes effort. It's just a lot easier to just silence people. So that's the tier one aspect of this, in my opinion. Now, let's just finish up with so tier two, we're just going to go into one aspect of tier two, this lens that's called the yellow lens. And it is called integrative or also called integral, but that could be confusing because in the integral world, that can mean a whole larger theory. But basically, seeing through all those lenses, the ability to see through all the lenses we just passed through, kind of the greatest hits of first tier, take all perspectives into consideration, but still make discernments, right? You're not like, oh, everyone's perspective is equal. No, basically, everyone's a little right. Everyone's got a point most of the time, but some people are more right than others. Some people are more accurate than others. That's the yellow perspective as I understand it. Now, I'm just going to finish up with the healthy and unhealthy versions of this, and then we'll get into breakout groups. So, yellow free speech, healthy, in my opinion. I'm going to respectfully challenge ideas while proposing new models that some may find threatening. So it's not just opposing, it's actually like, okay, well, what is the better way of doing this? So an example can be pointing out the limitations of tier one thinking. So you'd be like, okay, well, that's really coming from a very blue perspective. I'm going to, point that out, and maybe we can see that there are shades of gray in this, right? So that could be a free speech that's healthy in yellow. It still pisses people off, right? Unhealthy free speech in yellow could be, I'm going to go after people personally for their ideas. So I'm going to make personal attacks on people and then say like, "Oh, you're so tier 1, you're so uninvolved, you're so backwards." It's like, "Okay, maybe you think that, but dismantle that argument. Speak out against that argument or provide what you believe is a better alternative." The going after the individuals and chastising them personally, I think would be an unhealthy version of yellow free speech. It's not always coming from yellow, but let's just say that it is. Now, healthy free speech, or sorry, healthy censorship in yellow would be, I'm going to err on the side of free speech, but censor in some situations based on an being honest with myself and others, rational, okay, this ties together, framework that can evolve over time. So it's something that's flexible. So this is what we see sometimes in spiral dynamics online groups, right? It's like, well, let's figure out the best way to do this here. We're not just going to knee jerk get rid of people, but there are times where we need to get rid of people. So let's think about this, how we can do this, and maybe it changes over time as we learn more. That could be a healthy version of yellow censorship versus an unhealthy version of yellow censorship, so I'm going to err on the free side of free speech. It's going to let stuff go until something comes along that I personally find threatening or objectionable. And then I'll come up with some convoluted rationalization after the fact. I've experienced that is a lot. So that's also what we see in a lot of these spiral dynamics groups is a lot of, well, the reason we're doing this is because of this very complicated, and we're too evolved for you to understand why we're sent. No, you just don't like it and you want to get rid of it. And we're all human beings, and including people who have access to yellow thinking. Sometimes there's mistakes made. Sometimes there's personality issues, whatever. I would say that is an unhealthy version of censorship. A comment was made that it doesn't count as yellow. That may be true. It's really hard to say, but I would argue that there is such a thing as yellow censorship that is unhealthy, and it still might be coming from yellow. So that makes that up. So last little points here. This is a real life situation that I'm going to bring up to you all that I would like to be addressed in the breakout group so we can come up with some guiding principles that we can instate in real life. So here's the situation. Several of us who are admins of this group are also admins of a couple of the Spiral Dynamics Facebook groups. And one in particular is kind of open to the public and is a larger one. And sometimes we get people who can be very difficult and there'll be some conflicts. And so there's one person in particular we've recently been dealing with, but it's come up time and time again. People don't like his communications in this person, this individual. And over time, people have actually left the group because some of us admins wouldn't just boot him because he wasn't technically breaking any rules that we sort of had in mind when we asked people to join the group. Now, other people in the group have said we've censored too much because we've taken a few things down. So not everyone's going to be pleased because we're not coming from everything goes all the time, and we're not coming from, oh, as long as it's according to this political spectrum, it's fine. So he doesn't do personal attacks, this person. It can be argued that he does, but he's not saying you are an idiot, right? That would be a personal attack. He's a little bit more sly about it. So he kind of gets through the rules. He's confrontational, he's rude, all of those things. And personally, I don't think he really contributes a lot to the conversation. But I haven't wanted to boot him because I haven't seen a real justification for doing so. But I do think it is time for the group to come up with some guiding principles for how to deal with these things. And so we need to be able to allow people to maybe not be polite, maybe not, oh, they're not saying things exactly as I would have them said. Well, that might not be a reason enough. Then it becomes whoever the admin is, just their personality gets to decide. And I've done some of that. I certainly have. But that I think is too much. And then there could just be chaos. Anything goes. So here is the question for the breakout groups, which I would like us to discuss for about 30 minutes. And I can't censor you. So if you want to talk about other things, that's fine. But so in integral spaces, so let's just say those of us who are aware of these theories and can sort of look at things from the different lenses and be reasonable. In this particular online group, so if we were going to make some guiding principles for the online groups, what would they be in terms of when it is okay to allow free speech and when it is time to remove censorship? And obviously, this is just applying to Facebook groups and not the larger world, but it's a simple place to start. And then we'll do the breakout groups and then we'll go into the larger stuff. So I will end my presentation now.